webinars. This lesson is about Hamza and Hamza-tul-qat. Objectives: to learn what Hamza-tul-qat is, to learn some very basic grammar, to have a background in reading Hamza-tul-qat. So we'll be looking at the definite article, imperative verbs, and what we call irregular nouns. We will learn what the sun and moon letters are and how they're used with the definite article. We will cover the shortening of the sounds due to Hamza with Sukun. Okay, so we've learnt so far, and we've covered this a few times in previous lessons, that the Hamza can be written in many ways. So we have the Hamza written on its own. It can be seated on other letters. So it can be seated on Alif, under Alif. It can be seated on the Waw, the Ya. The joined up version is on a little curve, and we've got the Lam Hamza and Lam Hamza, one with the Hamza that will carry normally Fatha or Dhamma, and the other one carrying the Kasra. And for our purposes, we're going to call these the normal Hamzas. Now, in proper terms, the terminology for that is written up in the top right in Arabic. A bit difficult to pronounce. It's Hamza-tul-qat. So that it's difficult to pronounce, so we're going to call it the normal Hamzas. So these are the normal Hamzas that we're used to. Now the other one that we've covered is Hamza-tul-qat, and that is this small sign on top of the Alif, which is known as the Wasla. Okay, and we're going to cover this lesson really about how these are all read and any peculiarities that you need to know about. So the normal Hamzas then. First thing to note, all of these normal Hamzas can carry Fatha, Kasra, Dhamma, Sukun. They can also carry the, well, in some cases they can carry the Tanween, especially the Hamza on its own. The main thing to note here is the Hamza, the normal Hamzas, can carry the vowel sounds and they can be silent. Okay. So here's a few examples. We've got the A, E, U, A, U, etc. And the main point here, and we've covered this before, is the Hamza will always be pronounced as the Hamza. Even if it's sitting on a Waw or a Ya, they're still pronounced as a normal Hamza. Now, the only peculiarity with the normal Hamzas is this one case. And what we have, if we look at the three examples that we've just put up, and I've highlighted them in red, and effectively what it is, we have a sound in a word which is followed by a Hamza which is Sakin. Now again, we've used the round circle here to indicate the Sukun because this is the computer font. So in all these three cases, we've got a sound followed by Hamza with Sakin. Okay, and we've done three examples, one with a Fatha, one with a Kasra, and one with a Dhamma. Now in the case you have a sound, and it will normally be a short vowel, so i.e. the Fatha, Kasra or Dhamma, and it's followed by a Hamza with a Sukun, i.e. Sakin. You effectively pronounce the sound of the short vowel at half the normal length. Okay, so we'll just go through these examples. So the first one is we've got Iqra. Okay, so you literally shorten the Ra, which will normally be one long, cut it down to about half the length. So it'll be Iqra instead of Iqra. Okay, so we shorten it. The second one is Shi'tum. Shi'tum. So you just cut, instead of Shi'tum, you say Shi'tum. Cut the E sound in half. And the last one, instead of saying Mu Soda, we say Mu Soda. So it's half the length of the U sound. Okay, so we just go Mu Soda. Quick recap then, any short vowel followed by a Hamza which is Sakin, cut the length down by half. And really, out of the normal Hamzas, there's the only two things you have to remember. The Hamza is always pronounced as a Hamza, even if it is sitting on a waw or ya. And if any short vowel followed by a Hamza which is sakin, cut the length of the pronunciation of the short vowel to half its length. Okay, now we come to the Hamza-tul-qat. Now this is a bit more of a complicated area. Now the Hamza-tul-qat, i.e. the wasla sign on top of the alif, can be used in many ways. And unfortunately, the only way you can really understand this in any proper depth is to study Arabic grammar. And you'd have to do at least an elementary level of grammar to understand all these. However, this is good background information. So we're going to divide this up into 4 different sections. Firstly, something called the definite article, which in English is the word the. We're going to have something called irregular nouns. And we've got what are called imperative verbs, which is effectively verbs that are commanding or ordering, normally a second person to do something. And then we've got exceptions to all these rules. So we're going to break these down one by one. So the definite article. In Arabic, the definite article, i.e. the, is written normally as the Hamza-tul-qat with the lam. And in different scripts it will be written different ways. So we've also got this written as they would write it in the Majidi script. So what they do in the Majidi script, and we've covered this before, they drop the wasla sign and they put in for you the short vowel. So remember, al is effectively what we say in English, the. So the first example here, they haven't put the fatha in. You need to know it's al. And in the second one, in the Majidi script, they may put a fatha in for you. So that's what the definite article is. And we'll take a small example. And this is very basic grammar. So here we have a word which is kitabun. Okay, and the dhammatain here is the computer version. It's the small dhamma with the hook on it, but it's representing dhammatain or dhamma tanween, whatever you want to call it. So this is kitabun. Now, in Arabic grammar, if you have a noun with the last letter which carries a tanween, it normally indicates that it is an indefinite noun, i.e. we're talking generally. So a book, we're not talking about a particular book. If you want to switch that general noun or common noun, whatever you want to call it, into a definite noun, i.e. we're talking about a specific book, then the rule is you prefix it, i.e. you start it with al, which is like putting the word the on the front of it, al, and the tanween effectively gets changed to a single haraka. I.e. instead of tanween, you take, if in this case we've got the 2 dhammas, we change it for 1 dhamma. So kitabun, a book, becomes al-kitabu, which is the book. Okay, so that's just the background on the word al. And if you look in your Quran, you will see lots and lots of words with the beginning or beginning with al, because they're just talking about definite objects. Okay, the next thing then, so we're going to build this up slowly. In Arabic grammar, there is a concept of what we call sun and moon letters. And they're divided into 14 and 14. And we've got a table here showing us which letters are classed as sun letters and which are classed as moon letters. So we need to know what is the significance of this. And this is related to the definite article and how you use it. So terminology, sun letters in Arabic, they're known as al-harufush shamsiya. Okay, and the word shams is sun. Okay, huruf here means letters. And then we've got the moon letters, they're known as al-haruful qamariya. Okay, and the moon again is qamar in Arabic. Okay, so break it down into the sun and moon letters. And we'll see later on the rule that we're looking for is actually built into these actual words as examples. Okay, so now we get into why we need to know these sun and moon letters. So I'm just going to read this. We're going to ask ourselves a question, okay, and this is again for the noun. Is the first letter in the word, and in our case we're really talking about nouns, a sun or moon letter. And in the brackets I've got without the definite article, i.e. if you look at a word without the definite article added to it, is the first letter a sun or moon letter? Okay. Now, if it is a sun letter, we're going to add a shadda when we put on the definite article. So let's explain with this simple example. Again, we've highlighted things in red. So we have a noun. So this is shamsun, or if you just read it as a normal word, you'll just say shams. So that's the sun. Now, the first letter, the sheen, is classed as a sun letter. We then go to change the indefinite noun into a definite noun. So we add the definite article al, so which is the Hamza-tul-qat and lam. So then you say, okay, the first letter, the sheen, is a sun letter. So what we're going to do when we add or prefix the word with the definite article al, we're going to add a shadda on the sheen. Okay, so shamsun becomes effectively ash-shamsu. Okay, and this is important because we need to know how we read them. And effectively, the shaddad letter, i.e. the letter with the shadda, will always be joined to a previous sound. Okay, so if we were to read the definite article as al normally, what will happen here, and you'll notice in your script that when the shadda is added to the sun letter, they will not put a sukoon on top of the lam of the definite article. And the reason is we're joining effectively the fatha that would normally be read on top of the Hamza-tul-qat directly to the letter with shadda. So instead of saying al-shamsu, we will have to read this as ash-shamsu. Now, let's contrast this or compare it, whichever way you want to look at it as, to a moon letter. So we do the same thing again. And the rule is, if the first word is one of the moon letters, we do not add a shadda to it when we prefix the word with the definite article. So here we've got the word qamara. Sorry, we've got the word qamar. Okay, and the full with the grammar would be qamarun. Okay, so indefinite noun. Prefix it with the definite article, it becomes al-qamaru. Okay, so we've dropped one of the dhamma. So again, you look at the first letter, it's one of the moon letters. When we add the definite article al, we do not put a shadda on the letter. In this case, the letter is qaf. So in that case, the al is actually read as al, and you've got a sukoon will be put on top of the lam. And we've done the sukoon here in computer font, which is the round circle. So this will be read as al-qamaru. Okay, so you can see the difference now. The simple rule is when you're adding the definite article onto an indefinite noun, i.e. to make it definite, look at the first letter. If it's a sun letter, we add a shadda. If it's a moon letter, we do not. And then when you read the al, if it's a sun letter, you effectively assimilate that or join it with the letter with shadda. And if it's a moon letter, you effectively read the al as al. Okay, so we're going to look at a few examples to sort of build on this. And remember, if you just remember these two words, shams and qamar, then effectively you've got the two words that you need to remember for this particular rule. And that's why they're called the sun and moon letters, because it's a simple example to remember. Okay, so actually pronouncing the definite article, I've already gone over this, but we're going to do this in detail just to sort of reiterate it. So if you have no sound before the definite article, so what we mean by that, let's take both the moon and sun letters. So again, I've got the top examples are Uthmani script, the bottom ones are Majidi. Now let's take the first one under the moon letters. So this is alhamdu. Now what we're saying here is there's no sound beforehand, i.e. we're starting, let's say, at the beginning of a sentence. So you've got the Hamza-tul-qat and the lam, and we need to start to read this. So now the thing is, what do we read as the sound on top of the Hamza-tul-qat because itself does not have a sound. So the rule is with a definite article, there's no sound before it, you read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's got a fatha on it. So this will be al-hamdu, and notice there is a sukoon on the lam because the ha here is a moon letter, it's not carrying a shadda. Now down below that, you'll notice what they do in the Majidi script to help you along. So they drop the wasla and they put in a fatha for you, so you can just read it as alhamdu. So it's easy, you don't need to know all these grammar rules. Now in the case of the sun letters, so here we have a word starting with ra. So ra is one of the sun letters, so when we add the definite article al to it, it takes a shadda. Now it's the same rule here, there's no sound before it, beginning of the sentence. So we read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's got a fatha, but because we've now got the shadda on top of the ra, the shadda has to join to a sound before it. So we're going to effectively completely skip the lam. So we're going to join the fatha, which is going to be on top of the wasla, and join that to the ra. So in this case, and you'll know this word, we'll say al-rah, al-rah. Okay, you cannot say al and then the ra because the shadda has to join to something. So it's al-rah. And below they've got the same word. Now this is Majidi again. Now they haven't drawn the wasla, and actually in this case they have not even put in a fatha for you. The reason for that one is, in this case, is I've effectively taken that out of a line of Quran, and there is actually a sound before it, so you'll be joining to the sound before anyway, so they didn't need to put in the fatha for you. Okay, but if you were to see that on its own, all we need to know, there's no sound before it, read the al as if it's got a fatha on the Hamza-tul-qat and join it to the letter with shadda. Now we'll do the same thing, but this time we'll take an example where there is a sound before the letters, or before the words. So here we have the word again, and this is the word qamar, but we've got we've got the word wa before it. Okay, so we've got the definite article, but before that is wa. So in this case, you now do not read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's got a fatha, because we've got a word coming before it, and that has its own sound. So we got the fatha on the wa. So the wa will now join to the lam in the definite article in this case, because this is one of the moon letters, and the giveaway here is the lam has got a sukoon on it, so it is going to be involved in the sound. So we'll just say wal qamar. Okay, and below is the same thing in Majidi, so it's exactly the same except for they haven't put in the wasla. The giveaway again is you've got the small sukoon on top of the lam. Now with a sun letter with a word before it, essentially here we've got the wow with the fatha, so wa again, and because it's a sun letter, the sheen has taken a shadda, so the shadda must be joined to a sound before it. So we're going to skip the lam completely, and the giveaway here is there is no sukoon on the lam. So we're going to say washams. Okay, and that's the same below in the Majidi script, but again they've dropped the wasla, but essentially that is Hamza-tul-qat. So simple rule, in that case, if you got the sound before, just join it to the next letter that can be read. If it's shadda, shadda always joins to a previous sound. Now irregular nouns. So irregular nouns, we're not going to go into the grammar what is irregular, but all we need to know, there are a handful of nouns that themselves begin with Hamza-tul-qat, and we're not talking about the definite article now. We've completely finished with the definite article. So we've got a few words here. We've got imra'a, ism, and ibn. Okay, now the problem here, if you look at the Hamza-tul-qat, how do we know what should have been read on it? Okay, because there's no short vowels. And the simple rule is for these irregular nouns, so these are nouns which themselves begin with the Hamza-tul-qat independently of the definite article, because these are all actually indefinite, and you can tell that because they've all got dhammatain, so they've got tanween on the last letter. Okay, so the rule is you just read them as if they've got kasra, so that's why I read it as imra and ism and ibn. because I've read it with kasra. Now this is just a rule you need to know. Luckily there's only a handful, and I've taken this out of a certain document. These are literally the irregular nouns that you will most commonly come across. Okay, so there's only a handful. Okay, so they're listed there, and again, when you come across them, as long as you just write these 4 or 5 down, if you come across them, you'll know that they all will be read with kasra. Now in the examples they've put here with the Hamza-tul-qat again, they haven't actually put the wasla in there. Okay, so but that is Hamza-tul-qat. Read all of those with a kasra. Okay, the next one is just some examples from the Quran with these irregular nouns. Now in the first one here, we've got effectively the ibn, okay, the noun. Now don't worry, it's got a kasra, etc. That's all grammar. All we need to know here, we would normally read this if it was on its own as the Hamza-tul-qat with a kasra, so you say ib. But because there is a previous sound, so before that we have the sa, okay, and that ya there is the alif maksura, so don't worry about that. We've got the sa sound, so the sa will join to the ba, which is sakin, so that would be sabani. Okay, so in that sense, if we're not reading the Hamza-tul-qat at the beginning of our sentence, just look at what sound came before, and you've got the sakin on the ba, so we know that was going to join. So again, the Hamza-tul-qat itself, unless you're reading it at the beginning of the sentence, will never have its own sound. Below that is the Majidi script. Same thing again, they've dropped the wasla, but essentially it's the same. We cannot read that with the kasra because there's a sound before it. The ba has got sakin, join that to, sorry, the ba has got a sukoon on it, i.e. sakin, so join that to the previous sound, which is sa. Now, imperative verbs. So in grammar, there's this, there are different type of verbs. A verb is simply a doing word. Okay, so running, saying, talking, etc. But there's certain types called imperative verbs, which are normally where you're commanding a second person. So you'll say enter, leave, or you tell somebody write, etc. So these are all imperative, telling somebody to do something. Now they have a certain structure in grammar, but all we need to know, for those of you who are doing grammar, because really this applies to people who know a bit of grammar, is that if the imperative verb, you're going to ask a question, what short vowel is on the third letter in the imperative verb? Now the imperative verbs take a certain form, and generally they'll start with the Hamza-tul-qat, and that's why we're covering it here. So we'll look at a verb. So the first one here, and the top line again, sorry, the top one here is Uthmani, and actually on the right are the Majidi, sorry, on the left are the Majidi versions. So here we've got Iqra, okay, and this is, which means read, and it's a command, read. And they normally follow a certain pattern. They will begin with the Hamza-tul-qat, the second letter will be sakin, and the third letter will have its own sound. So what we're talking about is if we have one of these imperative verbs, we're looking at the third letter and we're going to analyze the short vowel on it. So the rule is, or the first rule, if that third letter has a kasra or fatha, we're going to read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's carrying a kasra. So this is why we look at, let's take the first example, Iqra. So the ra has fatha, it's the third letter. The one before it will always be sakin. So we're going to read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's as if it's got the kasra underneath it. So that's going to be Iqra. And again, it's short half sound on the ra because the next letter is a hamza with sukoon. Okay. On the left hand side, we've got the same in the Majidi script, and again they've put in the kasra for us to help us along. Now the next example is an imperative verb again, and it's, well, it's not completely imperative verb, there's actually an attached pronoun on the end, but if we just say the first bit, the Hamza-tul-qat, the ha and the dal, that's your imperative verb, which is saying guide. So it's sort of a command, guide us. And you say this in your prayer, but although grammatically it's a command when you're obviously asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide us, because you can't obviously command Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do anything. So that verb, again, we look at the third letter. The second letter is always going to be sakin, but the third letter carries a kasra. So the rule is we read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's carrying a kasra. So that's why we say ihdina. Okay, we read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's got a kasra. And in the Majidi script on the left, they've put in the kasra for us. So you've got two options really. You learn grammar and you understand why you're reading that, or you have the Majidi script, or you can do a sort of mixture. So you learn to read from the Uthmani script, which is better for you, but keep a copy of the Majidi script. And if you're confused, just quickly look at your Majidi script and work out what the i'rab should be, i.e. the short vowel. Sometimes if it's not even in the Majidi script, the only option you've got is to go online, listen to a professional reciter and see how they pronounce it, because there are exceptions to these rules. The next rule then is if the third letter carries a dhamma, which is effectively, we've covered the other two, kasra and fatha, so the only third one left is the dhamma, then you read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it carries a dhamma itself. Okay, so here we've got the word, so this is udhkuru, udhkuru. So we've read udh on the first sound, which is the Hamza-tul-qat with the dhamma. And again, what we've done, you've got Hamza-tul-qat, the second letter is sakin, and the third letter carries a dhamma. So we read the Hamza-tul-qat as if it's got a dhamma. Okay, so that's udhkuru. And in the second example is the Majidi, and again they haven't, in this case that I've taken out of the Quran, it hasn't got the dhamma, and the probability is there was a word before it with a sound which joined across to the dhal, which is sakin itself. Okay, so that's a bit of background. Again, studying grammar is worth doing to help this, but grammar is very difficult and it's a lot to learn grammar just to try and work out your tajweed rules. Okay, exceptions. So there are all sorts of exceptions to do with Hamza-tul-qat, which are covered in higher levels of tajweed. So we're not going to cover it here because it gets very complicated. And to get to a basic level of tajweed, as long as you can recognize that you've got the Hamza-tul-qat and there are certain rules, then you can get by. We have covered the bare essential points. So these are the absolute essentials. They're the major categories that you would come across when you're reading. So in conclusion, we know the basics of how to read Hamza-tul-qat on definite nouns. That's obviously with the al, the definite article. Irregular nouns, there was only a handful of them, which you can go back and write them down from the slide. And we've got the imperative verbs, which we've just covered. So whether you read a kasra or you read a dhamma on top of the Hamza-tul-qat. We know that the normal hamzas with sukoon cause the preceding sound to be shortened. So we saw that as well. We know that there are exceptions to what we have learned. So if you're interested, you can go onto some more detailed websites about tajweed, and you've got some very big scholars who have written it down to very low level detail, but it's very complicated. So we're just trying to get you started here. You will have to study in more depth to learn other exceptional rules, and the best bet is to learn an elementary level of grammar. Take you about 2 years, but you'll be able to cover most of it. If in doubt, always listen to a recitation from a professional reciter and check your pronunciation, and you should be doing that anyway. Every time you try to recite a verse, sing it or recite it along with a professional reciter from an MP3 player, etc., and check your pronunciations are right.